All right, this is Crash Canon. I'm Chris. Oh, I'm hearing an echo. Oh, it's gone now.
I
Good.
know. Yeah.
Anyway, this is Crash Canon. I'm Chris, and I've got a guest today. Who are you? What do you do?
My name is DESIRAE SIFUENTES. I run the account on CATECHIZED Catholic. It is for helping cradle Catholics and neophytes bridge that gap between basic catechesis and the higher level stuff. So I always put it in university terms. I'm trying to hit that 200, 300 level apologetics, but I also try to, catechetics, not apologetics. And I try to synthesize that in with the faith. So it's not just, hey, here's the teaching. It's also how you think about it, the thoughts that you should be having, things like that.
I'm glad that you said it that way because I don't think a lot of people realize catechetics and apologetics are different.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe give a brief definition of why they're different and what they mean.
Yeah, so apologetics is when you try to defend the faith, whereas catechetics is when you are just teaching the faith. It's the simplest way to put it.
I think people do get those mixed up because they learn a lot from apologetics.
Mm-hmm.
But apologetics is not an intended course for you to become Catholic or to learn more about. I mean, it is intended for you to learn more about Catholicism, but it's not always intended to be the course for you to learn about the faith.
No, and they have such a strong overlap too. Like I engage in apologetics inevitably, but it's happened quite a number of times on my account where you can't control who sees your stuff and where the algorithm pushes you. But I am actively talking to Catholics. I am like bi-Catholic for Catholics kind of thing.
Yeah.
And inevitably Protestants or whoever finds your stuff and they want to comment and they want their 2 cents and whatever. And it's like, I'm not talking to that person.
Right.
And so usually I just let it slide unless it's egregious or I think it actually contributes to the post. But yeah, you wind up doing a lot of apologetics on accident when catechizing. And I think you also end up catechizing via your apologetics. So
yeah, catechizing in public will inevitably lead to apologetics in some way, shape, or form. Yeah. And whether or not people respond well to that is a different story.
Exactly.
I had the funniest comment I've ever gotten was recently. I interviewed Elijah Schaefer last week, and the comment was, "Catholics don't believe in the 10 Commandments." I'm like, what?
Okay.
Oh, really? This is your comment? You came here to say this? Okay, all right, whatever. Anyway.
You say so, ma'am.
So how long have you been Catholic now?
I mean, I'm a cradle Catholic. I just reverted.
Oh, right. So you're like me. You had a brief detour at some point in your life.
Exactly.
Although your detour was much more interesting than my detour.
Yeah, my detour was fully out.
About when did you have your detour and where were you at, like age-wise, life-wise, all that fun stuff?
So I had graduated high school and I went straight into college. And I was the only like diehard practicing Catholic that I knew, but it's like I'm a practicing Catholic. Yeah. The way that I was raised was largely uncatechized. And so my idea of what the Catholic faith was more or less you pray before your meals, you pray before you go to bed, and you go to mass on Sundays and sometimes on holy days of obligation, but also like what is a holy day of obligation? I don't really know.
Right.
And also sometimes we just miss because like we just need a day. But we won't miss watching football. And that was sort of it. I felt a lot like my faith was just like, hey, Lord, thanks for this and good night. And let me clock in and out on Sundays. And then I'm done, you know? But I sort of had like a primary conversion and then a secondary conversion. And I had my primary conversion when I was 13. I had gone to Catholic school from 2nd grade to 7th grade. And then after 7th grade, I switched to public school. And when I was in Catholic school, I was like a little rebel, you know, like my dad was a Republican. So I was like, I'm a Democrat. And it was just a rebel without a cause, sincerely. And
right.
When I went to public school, it was the first time that I'd ever really faced like, oh, I can't just take for granted that everybody around me is Catholic or that everybody around me even believes in Jesus. And also like, what is a Mormon? I didn't even know that was a thing, really.
Were there a lot of Mormons at the public school?
So many. I'm from Arizona, and so they call it Morador. It's a Mormon corridor of like Arizona, Utah, Idaho, and a little bit of Wyoming, I think. But yeah, it's like this section of the country that's like super, super Mormon. And
Yeah,
Yeah,
Kyle
so
talking mad smack in the chat, by the way.
I'm part of Mormon Inc. actually, but I'm like the worst member. Anyway, so lots of Mormons, and that was like my introduction to them. And that instance of recognizing that I couldn't just take Catholicism for granted. It's not that everybody believes the same things, yada yada yada. That was my primary conversion. So
Yeah.
at that point, I say that it was the first time that I was Christian by choice, but I was Catholic just by circumstance. If I had been raised in a Lutheran faith, then I would have been Lutheran, you know?
Right. Yeah.
But I started paying attention and like wanting to go to mass. And when I was a little bit older and had the ability to take myself, even if my other family members didn't go, I did, you know? So I took it seriously enough, even though I was not very well catechized at all. And once I hit 18, graduated high school, I was like desperate for community. And I had tried to get into it at the parish that I was raised in, but it just wasn't very thick there. And they had a youth group when I was in.
When you say thick, maybe for the Gen Z folks that think it means something, maybe you should explain what you mean.
What I mean is like there's thin community, you know, like it's barely there. It's like we all kind of go to mass together, but then when it's over, like we leave and we don't talk to each other. I had been going to the same parish since I was in 3rd grade at the oldest. It might have even been before that. And I didn't know the names of like most of the people there. I think I knew some of the last names of some of the people. And in all of that time, there's only one person from that parish that I keep in touch with to this day. I recognize plenty of other people, like some of when I went to Catholic school, it's the Catholic school that's attached to that same church. Some of my old teachers are there. And so like once every few years, I wind up going back and I'll see them and I'll like say hello to my old teachers and, you know, old classmates or whoever who still goes there who I recognize. But
that's a really interesting discussion we should come back to later.
Yeah.
I just had a discussion with the local priest at the parish we attend, and he was talking about how like most of the people that attend, especially masses that are how do I say this? If there's an age gap amongst the people that attend, the age gaps don't mix. So there's like no community building going on. It's like if you have a bunch of millennials and some elderlies, probably not really talking to each other very much.
Yeah.
And so he wants to kind of bridge that gap a little bit.
Yeah. It's definitely, I think, a combo of the public school effect or even just traditional school effect, not just public school, but you're always around people your age. So that's all you interact with. And you think it's weird to interact with other people.
Yeah.
But also just like the nature of the parish. We had one fall festival every year. That was sort of an all ages thing. And then there was, I think it was Life Teen there. But I went when I got my own car and was able to drive myself whenever I wanted and not just borrowing my parents' car when I was a senior in high school. And so I started going as a senior, but it was definitely very like, oh, you're only going to be here for like a year and we don't really know you. I didn't know any of the kids who went to Life Teen. They were at, you know, different mass hours than I was, I guess. So I was like, okay, this is really weird. Like, I don't know you. You don't seem very friendly. So I just won't come back. And so that is how I graduated. Had no community, but I really, really, really wanted this Christian community like so badly. And I, at the time, being so uncatechized, I said it again, I did not know what the Reformation was. I didn't know anything. I thought you picked your denomination just because like you went there and you were like, yeah, the vibes, like I like this. And I had been to a few different Protestant churches by that point and I didn't hate them, didn't love them. I was like, this isn't the church that I go to. But the church that I went to was not full of this thick community. And so I was like, where can I go that obviously does emphasize the community? You know, it can't just be that my parish has this problem. This is like a Catholic thing. Catholic churches are just like this. So where can I go that has this community? And then I thought of the Mormon church because I knew that they were like always doing things, you know, oh no, I'm not going to go to homecoming. I'm going to my church's homecoming. Oh no, I'm not going to go to the like winter or whatever because my church is doing a winter or whatever. And like, we also have the pageants and we have like Pioneer Day and like, I don't know, all this stuff. So I was like, they have a lot of community. I know that they have all of these groups to hang out in, you know, the young single adults and like the married and stuff like that. So I went I had a friend from high school. I actually had several friends from high school who were Mormon, but one in particular, I was like, hey, can I go to mass with you? Or not mass, to church with you? And
What do Mormons call their service of
church
worship?
service,
Church,
whatever.
okay.
Yeah. And so I was like, can I go with you? And she was like, sure. And I was sort of hesitant because back then church was 3 hours long. It was 1 hour of real service and then 2 hours of classes basically afterward. And
Because they had to re-educate you on the Mormon scriptures, right?
Well, it's for everyone. So this comes into play in the story, but I went to the young single adults service. And so I was there with other young single adults. And then afterward, we would split into 2 separate groups. And one was you're investigating or you've been Mormon for a year or less. And the other group is having been Mormon for at least a year or more. And you get 2 separate indoctrinations, basically, in like the most neutral way possible. That's like all it is it's just catechetics, I guess is even a nicer way to put it, but it's different. It's milk before meats.
Yeah.
So I went there and I was like, honestly, I could do this. And they invited me to some of their, weekly activities. I remember we went to somebody's really nice house and we were making s'mores and hanging out. And it was just very counter culture to what a lot of other people I knew who weren't necessarily super religious were doing. And so I was like, yeah, I could do this. And I have not watched it, Kyle. I will,
I wasn't going to interrupt. I was going to let that ride until we got to a point, but
I'll be a nuanced member was sort of my conclusion. So I wound up getting with the sister missionaries. I chose the sisters and I converted. They dunked me, the whole thing. And it was in that process that my life just completely changed. So I remember one of the sister missionaries during my baptism, she gave a speech. And in her speech, she said that before your baptism, your life is kind of like driving a car with the headlights turned off. So you're in the dark because you don't have the Holy Spirit, but you get these bursts of light every now and then from the street lights. But in between are these stretches of darkness where you're just alone. And then after your baptism, it's like you turned on your headlights. And so sometimes the light is brighter and sometimes it seems darker, but really the Holy Spirit is always with you. And I remember she said that. And I was like, that's weird. I've always felt the Holy Spirit with me. And then I got dunked. And the Holy Spirit left me. And it was not something that I recognized immediately. It was just like I went from living life in full color to black and white. I felt nothing. I was completely numb. If I felt anything at all, I was just sad and depressed all the time. And I couldn't find happiness ever at all with anything. And it was a dark 3 months for me before I finally realized what had happened. I was praying and I was just racking my brain trying to figure out. I was like, I have the community now. I don't see my dad as much because I would mostly see my dad going to church with him because I was 18 and 19 and had moved out of the house and all that stuff. But I was like, I just don't think that that's why I feel this way. I think it's something else. And I was praying about it. And I finally realized that this started right around the time that I had been baptized. And so I was like, Lord, was that it? Was it the leaving the Catholic Church to become Mormon? Because if it was, just give me a sign and I swear I will go straight back to the Catholic Church. Absolutely. And in that moment, have you ever laid down at the beach and laid in the sand and let the wave kind of come over your body as it comes up?
All the way across?
Yeah.
No, I've never done that.
Okay. So, but you're aware of the sensation of the water hitting you, right? Okay.
I was on the swim team for a decade or more, so I know what you're talking about.
Okay.
But I did not do it at the beach. Most of the beaches near me are kind of gross.
No, bummer. But yeah, I'm actually not a beach person myself, but I say that because it's the only way I know how to describe this. I felt that sensation rush not over my body, but into my body. My insides were filling with that sensation. And I immediately stopped sobbing. And I knew instantly that when I was baptized, the Holy Spirit left me, or rather I left the Holy Spirit. And that was him coming back and filling up my bodily temple again. And I was just like, holy cow, I cannot be Mormon anymore. I have to be Catholic. I absolutely have to be Catholic. And I wound up actually going back to the Mormon church one more time because it kind of bothered me that they did the 2 separate classes thing. I was like, what do you learn in this class? And so I was like, I'm going to go one more time just because I really want to go to this class. And they kept asking me to leave the class without actually asking me to leave the class. Like, they wouldn't actually say, get out. But they were like, okay, we're going to start. If you're supposed to be in the other class, like, you need to get there. And I just like sat in the back of the room and I was like, I'm not going. So they realized finally after like 5 or 10 minutes that I was not leaving. And so they just started. And a big part of my conversion, when I told my dad that I was converting, he was not happy. And he printed off like all this stuff. And he started telling me, you Mormons believe this and Mormons believe that. And da-da-da-da. And one of the things he said was that Mormons think that the Book of Mormon supersedes the Bible. Like, the Bible is the foundation, the keystone, the cornerstone, however you want to put it, of the faith. And I was like, yeah, I don't know if that's true. So I asked the sister missionaries about it. And I was like, so the Bible's it, right? Like, you recognize that without the Bible, there wouldn't even be the Book of Mormon, right? Like, definitely one follows the other. And they're like, oh yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. The Bible is the keystone of our faith. And they said specifically the keystone of our faith. And this class that I went to that I wasn't supposed to be in, they had a whiteboard and they drew this arch on the whiteboard. And so there are all these rectangles and then one kind of trapezoid in the top and then more. And they pointed to this and they were like, what is this? And everybody responded. They're like, it's the arch of our faith. And they're like, and what are these? And they pointed to all the stones and they're like, it's the building blocks of our faith, whatever. And they're like, and what are the building blocks of our faith? And so they started saying Pearl of Great Price and Doctrine and Covenants and all this stuff. And then one of them he points to and they were like, the Bible. And it was like one of the rectangles. And I was like, oh, that's weird, but maybe they're doing something else with the keystone. I don't know. And then he points to the keystone and goes, what is this? And they're like, the Book of Mormon. And he was like, why? And they were like, I don't know. I don't even remember this once. I kind of like blacked out and I was like, there's no way. They just said the Book of Mormon is the keystone of their faith. And that was like a hinge point for my conversion. If they had said, oh, no, actually the Book of Mormon is the keystone because of reasons, I would have said I'm out, So I was like, okay, that was a lie, And I was like, I'm going to go to the Catholic Church and I'm going to stay here. But it hit me right away that it wasn't enough to have had this experience with the Holy Spirit if I was going to know my faith and be practicing it and I had just like a natural impression that I was going to be bringing other people to the faith in some way. And I was like, there's no way. Like, if someone told me their faith story, and honestly, this is a lot of what Mormons do, is they're like, feelings, like, how does this feel? What does the Lord tell you? Pray about it and see how you feel. I didn't have this language back then, but the Holy Spirit is not the only spirit who can act on your emotions. So I was like, it's not enough for me to say, oh yeah, and then this like wave filled up my body and I knew it was the Holy Spirit. I was like, I need to actually be able to articulate my faith and explain it and defend it. And so I need to have that faith and that reason. And so I started my pursuit of reason at that point and wound up getting a degree in theology and created and catechized Catholic. Went from there.
And it's funny that you go for like, I don't know if this is everybody's story, but it seems like most people who get heavy into like the theology and apologetics or catechetics or these online social medias, most people had either a conversion or reversion. It seems like a lot of people in this space, because I think it's easier to see the traps if you've fallen for them in the past than if you've never fallen for a trap. Now, I'm not saying that people who aren't having reversions or conversions can do this type of job, but it's a lot easier to see the faults if you've experienced them yourself. You know what I mean?
I think it's something that you are much more keenly aware of and sort of sensitive and tender to, and not in like a wimpy way necessarily, but in a, what's the word? You want to push back on that. You want to contribute to that justice. Like, this was a wrong. I was wronged. I've lost something. And so
you want to shut the door of heresy behind you and keep everybody else out.
To somebody else not making the same mistake or whatever. I saw this meme a while ago where somebody was like, every lifelong Catholic I know versus every convert I know. And the converts are like,
Oh,
Deus Vult, storm the kingdom, and then the lifelong Catholics are like, I think we feed hungry people, like we help the poor. It's like, yeah, honestly, like people who have just had this casual, mature faith their whole life and they never went through this stuff. It's very straightforward. This is what we do.
right.
They don't need to be super lofty and super intellectual with their faith and da 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 da. They're like, no, I get it. I got it. It's good. I'm happy to like live my Catholic life and do the things that I'm supposed to do, and that's it. But people who convert or revert are, at least for a season of time, are a little too far over, and you're gonna have to course correct and come back to the middle here.
Yeah. Well, that is an important part of catechizing current Catholics, because you go through RCA, OCI, catechism, whatever it is that you got on your path with, and then you spend who knows how long without getting any more catechesis in your life. Like, I mean, I didn't get any catechesis between the ages of 8th grade and like senior of college, basically. Junior, I don't know, whatever year I had my reversion back to the faith. I pretty much did not have any catechesis between those years. So it's like we're talking like almost a decade of no catechesis.
Yeah.
And I do think there should be continuing education on Catholicism for most people if they can find some time to do it. Yeah. But Haley brings up a good point. Maybe we got to stop right here. She's got Timothy 2:12 in the house.
Well, it's 1 Tim 2:12. So how dare you not even know your Bible, ma'am?
Yeah, I did. If you're gonna post it, you got to remember the one in front, right? And then Danny's backing her up. So true, so true. Anyway, and Lepanto's in the house. Enoch, Kyle. I just want to give shout outs.
Hi, everyone.
Cat Cans. Here's a good one for you. There's a movie, Heretic, about 2 LDS ladies going to the house of the crazy man.
I went.
Is it any good?
It was a good thriller for sure. It was not, groundbreaking or anything. I don't regret spending my money at the theater, but I also I probably wouldn't watch it again. It was just a good one-time story.
There's a lot of good movies like that.
The LDS theology, I think that was just like the vehicle, because everybody knows LDS missionaries are going around, and that was the whole point, was they went to the wrong house.
So would it actually make people more interested in LDS, or would it just be like a stone to get there?
There was nothing that I would think would compel you unless you have some kind of admiration for the missionary work itself, because the most into the theology it really got was just like, I do love Jesus and Jesus will get me through, and like I'm just going to trust Jesus, and I'm falling back on my faith to do the right thing, because it was a psychological thriller, like a horror thriller. So there was a lot of manipulation happening, like mind games happening. This guy basically has like a torture house.
Oh, geez, yeah.
You walk into a room and the door closes behind you and you can't open it again. And so now you're like, well, the way out is that way. So where do I go this way if I want to get out? And they like go into a freaky, scary pit in the house and stuff like that. It's just really horrifying, But a lot of it was him basically doing the same old, every faith has the same beliefs, same core beliefs. It's all kind of nonsense. But at the same time, there's like a one world religion that you can adhere to. And, are you going to still choose your faith, or are you going to like give in to this very real fear that I'm inducing into you right now? And, will they stick it out or won't they? I don't know. Watch the movie.
Let's see. Okay. Well, fair enough. I'm not really into those kinds of psycho thrillers, but I'm intrigued they use LDS missionaries for it.
So Kyle says, I have an erroneous affection for cats, and how do I reconcile that with my Catholic dogma that cats are bound to perdition? To that I say, the name is literally Catholic. Coincidence?
There's a relatively large YouTuber who had like the joke in the skit was like he was walking into a Cats Anonymous meeting or something like that. Yeah. But he didn't realize that it was Catholics Anonymous. So when he went in, there's like a priest pulling out a Bible and there's a crucifix. He's like, whoa, where am I? I think it was Scout the Wise, but I'd have to double check. Yeah, it was. Yeah, he thought he was carrying his cat into the meeting. Like, wait, whoa, what is this? Oh, anyway.
Danny also said I should get little googly eyes for my mic, and I totally should.
Could totally be a puppet master with your mic.
Yes.
We got your background is crooked from Mr. Lepanto.
Yeah. My mic is we taped everything down, and I didn't realize that it was going to make this annoying slant, and so I crashed out on the Discord about it, and I haven't fixed it yet because
I get it. I mean, half the time my webcam's tilted the wrong way, so I had to mess with it before I start my podcasts. We do have dogmas, not doctrine. LOL.
Hey.
All right, so let's go down the rabbit hole. What are some of the weirdest things you learned about the Mormon faith before, during, after, whenever, but that people don't really know about it? Because I've heard some weird stuff, and I don't know what's true and what's not.
So that's a hard discussion to have, because things that I learned are things that are not taught anymore, and things that
Okay.
like things that I was directly taught at church, not just I heard somebody say, but like like when I was talking to the
So
missionaries or when
does
I
the
was in
plot change over time then?
yes. They
Okay.
have something like 10 or 12 teachings that like don't really change, and it's really really bland stuff. Like we believe in the Heavenly Father, and we believe he sent his son Jesus down to save us and whatever, but it's really really bland, right? But they taught when I was there that there were 3 levels to heaven, which they still teach, but that only people who were like the best Mormons, temple worthy Mormons, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, could get into the top level of heaven. And the people who were in like the higher levels could go down to see people in the lower levels, but the people in the lower levels could never go up. And that the people who were the very best would get to be their own gods and have their own planets and like enact the same reality that we're living, but in their own universe, basically. So it was
Mormons have like a spiritual caste system?
it was like a turtles all the way down thing, like
Weird.
there was a phrase that they use. It's as God is no, as man is now, God once was, and as God is now, man can be, which is essentially to say, like, if you live your life with perfect virtue, more or less, then you get to have your own planet and be your own God. And if you're a man, you get to be like the man, and you'll have all these spirit wives, and you'll impregnate your spirit wives and create spirit children. And then the spirit children will get sent down to earth. And like, that's how we got here. There was a pre-existence of spirit life. And then
This sounds like Gnosticism. That's what it sounds
it's
like.
a lot of things. It's also really like Masonic. A lot of it, like Joseph Smith along the way when he was doing his thing, like the temple rituals weren't really a thing for several years, and then he became a Freemason, and then was like, we're gonna have all these handshakes in the temple, and people who were Freemasons and Mormon were like, this is the same stuff, So it's then they believed that the god of this earth came from a planet near a star, or a star. Well, I don't know. It was called Kolob, but they don't.
Oh yes, I've heard of this one.
And they also recently did away with the like you get your own planet thing. That's not a thing anymore, because the church seems to be trying to become much more mainstream Christian. In like the 90s and 2000s, they were a peculiar people, and they would talk about how they have like a glow and things like that. And they were like totally okay with being super, super different. But now they don't want to do that. But they've also like stripped away a lot of that community aspect to it too. And
Mormons used to be communities where they would all get together and build house. They were basically like kind of like modern Amish almost, with the way they would build their communities, because they would build their own houses. And a lot, like, let me put it this way: I've seen enough Mormon documentaries where they made it look like a cult, where they built their own houses and did their own things in small communities across. But those are the fundamentalists.
I was gonna say there's FLDS, because what happened was when Joseph Smith died, there was this like succession to the throne fight, basically, and so like it immediately fractured and splintered. And the mainstream Latter-day Saints, Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, that's like the main one that everyone knows about. And then like what's his name? Jeffries, whatever his name.
Right. Is it Walter Jeffries?
No, I mean, and I don't know if it was like his dad or something.
It
but
sounds
like,
familiar.
The guy who's super well known for the abuse, he was FLDS. That's if you've seen the documentary Keep Sweet.
Yep.
Yeah,
I think that's the one I saw.
Yeah, so that's different. I mean, same, like they have the right.
Yeah, like the second the leader dies, you'll see a lot of these groups fracture off into infinity.
Yeah, so there's a handful of those out there, and I think there was even like continued splits, like the show what is it called, Sister Wives, that show. They're from one of the like offshoots, And those people are very
Warren Jeff, she got it.
There we go. Yeah. Those people are very rugged, I would say. A lot of them are, like they have their farms and they live like just very sequestered, secluded type lives. But the LDS, like the mainstream LDS, are not, they're normal people. Like, not that.
What does the Mormon church teach about violence, though?
I don't know.
Are they Quakers?
I think, if I recall, they were supposed to be very docile. Like, in the beginning, Joseph Smith, one of his teachings was that you shouldn't even eat meat.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And they obviously don't stick to that now.
Wait, they weren't allowed to have like caffeine or alcohol.
Yeah.
But you could have Sudafed. That was totally fine.
You can have what's ketamine?
Ketamine, yeah. But there's also, did you know what Mormon tea is? Have you had it before? So Mormon tea, they found this plant. It's essentially the same type of plant. I think you can make like morphine with it or something. But the benign version of the plant, where you're not synthesizing it for like extreme drugs, is what you use for Sudafed. Huh. It's meth. Meth is what you can make out of it. That's right. But it's not the type you can get in the US. But that's why they have to keep Sudafed behind a pharmacy counter.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Yeah, no, that whole rule is also very strange. Like, they say you can't have hot drinks. That's the rule. And so it was like no alcohol, no coffee, no tea. But you can have hot chocolate, even though it's a drink that's hot, because it doesn't have caffeine. But you're allowed to have soda and energy drinks, even though they do have caffeine, because they're not hot. But then there are also some Mormons who will say, like, straight up, you can't have soda unless it's decaf. I don't know. Like, it's a really...
Well, all this to say, the discovery of this Sudafed plant that they discovered out west when they were trying to decide what they were going to drink and stuff, this stuff clears up your sinus. So like, yeah. I've gotten like the pure Sudafed plant before in the past. I made sure it was legit and it wasn't going to get me fired, for my job from drug testing or anything.
Yeah.
But so you just basically mix it with water and hope the mixture like keeps, but it's disgusting. But then after you finish drinking it, your nose is like fully clear. It's like gives the exact same effects as the little pills you take for Sudafed. Have you ever had it before?
Yeah.
And that stuff rocks.
Like,
you will not have any congestion whatsoever. So I'm like, it's an upper and it decongests you. Perfect for people trying to go out west in the cold.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. But yeah, all of the, I don't know how to say it. I would say, like, if they say dogmas are like those things that are very lukewarm or whatever, yeah, there's very few of them and they're very bland. But the doctrines, like things that are taught, whether you, I don't know, lived in a time where they taught them, or you live in a time where they like ignored it or switched it or whatever, those are much more fluid. And those are also things that are not so much taught by letter as much as they're taught by word of mouth. So there are some things where you can find, I mean, there's definitely plenty of things with like the priesthood and who is and isn't allowed to be in the priesthood. And
so do they actually call it a priesthood?
Yeah, they say that two levels of the priesthood. There's...
They wear collars?
No.
Entirely different. Okay,
no.
I was going to say.
They also don't do like pre-recited prayer, but a lot of the prayers that they say wind up kind of being the same thing. And so, but it's technically not pre-recited, even though basically everybody follows the exact same structure. There's like, I don't know. And then there are other things like when they're doing the prayer before the sacrament, like you do have to say every word for word. So I don't know. It's very...
Is there sacrament bread and wine, or is it something different?
It's a bread and juice.
Bread and juice. Okay, so yeah. they follow the grape juice line of the Baptist, huh?
Yeah. Yeah. But the thing that I find perhaps the most fascinating and admirable is that Mormons, they are not Christians by virtue of rejecting that apostolic Nicene creed. And as such, their baptisms are not valid. And so one thing that I find when I look across different denominations, particularly Catholics and Orthodox and Protestants, is that there's valid baptism across the board, right? And the way that I always describe getting these sacraments is it's like a grace bar. So if ultimately you can have this much grace when you get baptism, you have the capacity for this much of your grace bar. And then when you get reconciliation and confirmation and communion, full health bar. When you sin, it depletes it. But when you reconcile, you can refill it, right? So everybody who's a Christian has at least this much. But Mormons don't have any. Like none at all.
Their baptism's invalid.
But yet, culturally speaking, they have this incredible culture of being kind and being warm and stepping up and like doing all these incredible things. Like just the most recent thing that I can think of was a Mormon church just not that far away from me was harmed. Some guy like set it on fire and killed people, which was terrible.
Not far from me either.
He I guess he left behind a wife and at least one child, and that community created like a GoFundMe of sorts, and the Mormons themselves fundraised like $100,000 for his surviving family. And it's like that is exactly the like Jesus doctrine. That is exactly the like perfect forgiveness response, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And you don't see that across other denominations. And so, or consistently, you know, it's not like a culture across other denominations widespread. Right. They have that. And so that's one thing that I respect about them. And I also find it interesting because it's like they have no grace, like none. They have none, no grace, none. I'm sure they get that, you know, bursts of light in the middle, to use the sister missionaries example, but they don't walk around like with the Holy Spirit in them. And so how much harder must it be for them to live these virtuous lives? And I'm not saying it's perfect. I know many, many, many of my friends from even just my personal life friends who come from households where it looks very, you know, pretty, shiny, happy people on the outside. And then behind closed doors, things are not so hot. But just to have that culture to be so widespread, like, and you ask anybody about Mormons, they're going to say two things. They're a little weird, but they're also like the nicest people, you know. And it's like that's not a bad reputation to have, you know.
They're like the nicer Western version of Islam.
Yeah. They're the Americanized. I mean, that is what it is. It's like Islam for the American mindset, the American palate.
And actually, I think if I remember correctly, what's that guy's name? L. Ron Hubbard, like used some of the Mormon ideas for his Scientology religion.
Wow. I didn't know that.
Because he's got like the star children thing and like you could be part of the stars and we're all going to enter this galaxy of whatever. When we die. Scientology is a wild cult.
Oh gosh, I have a book on them. I haven't even cracked it open yet. I have so much. I could show you. I have literally I have several bookshelves next to me, and there's one that's just full of Catholic stuff. I've got 3 shelves dedicated to just Mormon books, and I got one Scientology book. I mean, I don't even know where it is. I don't know if I've unpacked it yet, but I've read, at least begun to read, like half of these things, and then the rest of them are like, oh, I used it for school, or you know, it was a I will read this purchase, and I just haven't gotten to it yet.
Are you aware of like the connections between the early formation of NASA and Scientology and the occult?
No,
it's very strange. It's all connected.
Yeah.
What's that guy's name? Aleister Crowley was involved in some of the crazy parties they did. Anyway, if you ever want to go down a massive rabbit hole, look up Jack Parsons and all the people he was hanging out with during the Jet Propulsion Lab time period of NASA. And you will be shocked at what kind of stuff led to us going to the moon.
Did we go to the moon?
I'm not answering that question for you. You gotta do your own deep dive and figure it out for yourself, okay? I'm not saying we did or didn't, but there's some weird stuff going on there. They literally had to get Nazi scientists to get the rockets. That is true. That is true. Scary stuff. Okay. So on your deep dive through this, do you feel like some of your apologetics are geared towards Mormons, or do you think that that's just a fascination of yours that's carried on after you've come back to Catholicism?
Both and, I guess, because right after I realized I had been lied to about the structure there, I was like, you know, I went in saying I'll be a nuanced member, and by that I meant I'm going to keep all of the same beliefs that I had beforehand, and
just kind of join for the community aspect.
The Joseph Smith part. But yeah, I was like, but clearly they're teaching and believing in things that they're not advertising to begin with. And their whole pipeline, I don't know if you know, their whole pipeline is from the time that they meet you to the time that you're getting dunked. They want like 6 weeks. So ideally, the missionaries have like 6 lessons with you. And you have these discussions, and then they're like, okay, do you want to be baptized now? And then you, at least for me, you take like a test where a brother missionary, even though he was not overseeing my formation, it had to be a brother missionary, quizzes me basically on the things that I learned. And if I pass the quiz, I get to be baptized. And so that's what happened. And then you do that class for your first year, and then you switch to the other class, and that's it. So that's how that like shakes up. But it's like, it's strange that they'll pull you in without even giving you the most basic formation. And that's one thing that I very much like about the Catholic Church, is that OCIA is really long, but like there's no question, like these are the things you must know and believe.
By the time you're done with it, there's no question that you're going to go through with it.
Exactly.
Because if you weren't, you wouldn't go. You would.
There's no honeymoon. Yep.
Yeah.
So, after I came out, I was like, well, what the heck was that? I basically like rubbernecked the religion to a certain extent. And I've stayed in certain groups or forums or chats, and then I've read a whole bunch of books and have like a lot of the stuff that I have is just their own stuff. Like I've been thrifting, and I find History of Joseph Smith is one that I'm looking at. The Holy Temple is another one that I have. It's just, and some of it's Mormon written, like those, and then other ones are things like The Idiot's Guide to Mormons, or like Inside Mormonism, What the Church Really Teaches, which is a Catholic priest who left the church in the 90s. He was defrocked, quit, basically, married one of his lady friends, and then they hit like the Mormon speaker circuit, and they became Catholic convert Mormons who were like famous in that circle. And then he had
probably not that many.
No. I mean, they did say, that was one thing that I was told when I was at my church, was they're like, oh, former Catholics make the best Mormons. And I was like, that's such a weird thing to say, but okay.
That is a weird thing to say.
Yeah. But yeah, so he reverted, but he was married. And so there's no undoing that. And so he wrote a few books actually on Mormonism, I guess, and like what they really believe, and like how to handle when Mormons come. Actually, I have one right here. This book, I think, is out of print. It was published by Catholic Answers. But yeah, When Mormons Call by Isaiah Bennett. This is the old Catholic Answers. Can you see it? Focus, camera. The old
I can see it.
Logo.
I can see it.
Yeah. So he wrote this book, and then this is sort of like the light version of the much thicker Inside Mormonism book. But yeah, so I read that stuff. I actually had a very close friend convert as well in like recent history. And so
from Mormonism or to Mormonism? To Mormonism. Okay.
Yeah. He was, well, all respect his privacy, but it actually wasn't that big of a leap for him in terms of like what he professed to believe in, but it was a surprise that he did it. And so we'll talk about apologetics from time to time. It used to be a lot more often, but I don't think he liked it that much. So we toned it way down. But yeah. So combo of that, like rubberneck, looking back into it. And also I think it's just sort of like an accident. People hear you were Mormon and they want this whole conversation. And so I inevitably like do exactly what I did here, where I kind of speed run how that all happened. And then they ask what I know about certain beliefs. And it's like, I don't know. It's trying to, you remember when we were kids, they had that toy that was like a sleeve and it was filled with like rubber and you could kind of like squeeze it and you could put your arm in it and stuff like that. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
Yeah. So when you would try and grab it and squeeze it, it would kind of slip through your hands. And like that is sort of like trying to grab and grasp onto like what Mormons believe. So it's a difficult conversation to have every time, because it's like you'll start to say like, oh, but that you, or, you know, if I'm talking to an active one, I'll be like, but you believe X, Y, and Z in 1, 2, and 3. And they'll be like, is that dogma? Is that doctrine? You know? And it's like, well, I don't know where you wrote it down. Like, I'm kind of busy studying Catholicism, but
it's funny that you say that though, because it seems like it's the definition of, oh no, they're catching on. Change it.
Yeah.
Like they figured out we're crazy. Change it to something else. I don't know. It seems to me like if your beliefs have to shift that much, maybe there's some level of untruth there because it's like the best faith is the one that remains unchanged throughout and only becomes more defined.
Yeah. And I don't like I don't want to punch down. That's one thing that I think I know actually they view that as like a sign that they're right, like the world hates you, it hated me first. Like they really believe that, and people are mean to them. So it's like, I can see why, so you
don't want to harden somebody's heart. You want to make sure you're coming from a place of compassion for them, that they will see that and they will like, okay, this person loves me or wants me to the best for me, and I should hear them out. That's really the best way to evangelize. Nobody wants to talk about it. They want to just go out into a random crowd shouting Christ is king, and like people go rah rah, yeah, but that you're not going to convert people that way. I mean, it might work, but
it's the same thing. I actually tweeted this recently, or I responded to somebody who was talking about I think it was Lila Rose said something like, if you want to appeal to women, you need to stop like beating them down. And somebody who I'm like internet friends with was like, women are like kind of responsible for their own demise, and so I think the coddling needs to end. And my response to that was, yes, but it's a both and situation. Women, feminism, like it's largely something that women have done. And so there's going to be a fallout from that, right? But also the dialogue that you see all the time online, I won't say the actual words because I don't know about like the algorithms and all these places, but when you call them R word SLOOTS, that doesn't make them sympathetic to the case for sanity. Like
SLOTS?
I said SLOO. Sound that out.
Oh, okay. I was like, wait a second, slots? Like what?
Yeah.
They go to the casino? Like, what are you talking about? Okay,
but yeah,
I got
it. Say that, like you dumb. And it's like, I'm sorry, in what universe do you as a woman receive that and go, you're so right, I am a dumb one. Why don't, I'm just going to listen to everything you say. Like, no, she's going to give you the bird if she has absolutely no class, which, hello.
People forget there is a divide in how you talk to men and how you talk to women.
It's not even that. It's how you.
But there is absolutely a difference between how you would talk to a man and how you talk to a woman. Because if you call a woman names, they're going to respond usually not very, unless you know them well and they understand it's joking. They're not going to respond well to that. But if you go and say like call somebody names and it's a dude, you might end up becoming best friends with that person.
I think it's a difference between like just the relationship.
It is.
I call my female girlfriends names all the time.
But as a man, if I went to a random woman and started calling them names, they're gonna be like, who the heck are you?
I also think if a woman was like in your face though and was like, you DICK, you ASS, I mean, you will either be like, who are you, if it actually kind of bothers you, or you're just kind of gonna be like, you're an idiot, and I'm gonna like laugh.
Well, I'm specifically, so like a lot of my audience is Gen Z men, and like sometimes they don't understand that you can't talk to men the same way you talk to women on the internet.
No, and I think that's actually a big part of it, is that there's a lot of like especially anon accounts who act like they're in a male chat room and they're not. Like women see this and then they go, you're a big fat problem. I don't want anything to do with that. And I don't want to listen to anybody who espouses anything even like remotely similar to this. And in a weird way, I think that's how you get the like Charlie Kirk effect, where it's like he actually didn't say a lot of the stuff that people who would otherwise generally align with him will say in their anon accounts, but then he gets a lot of that pinned on him because politically these people probably vote really, really similarly.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's just, I don't think that acting like if you wouldn't say it to my face, you shouldn't be saying it online. And if you are going to say something tough, there should be a really good reason. I say tough things, people online, semi-frequently, but I always try to start it with something like, with love, or, hey, I'm going to say this to you because we've talked enough. I think you can take it. What the heck was that? And things like that. I've had plenty of conversations, especially private messages with people, because it's worse to do this without it being in private.
I have stronger language for people I know personally than for people I don't know.
Yeah, absolutely. But even still, like, there are people who there's one where we only had a couple very minor exchanges online, But for anonymity's sake, they very publicly, at one point in time, practiced the whole if your brother is wrong, correct him privately, then with friends, then in front of the church, right? He very publicly did that, but he did it correctly, and it was wonderful. And then he came back later and to somebody else skipped over the talk privately and talk with friends and took it straight to the church. And then that person sent it to me. It was a guy. He sent it to me and he was like, hey, I saw that you liked this content and this is my response to it. So I wanted to respond to you. And I was like, what is this? And basically one person posted about something that this guy interpreted as being a subtle like dig at a few Catholic topical things that like X was blowing up about, right? But I knew that this guy didn't know the other person who made this post, but I knew the other person who made this post, like where we have each other's phone numbers kind of thing. And so I was like, did you even ask this person what they meant? Because that's not what I took from their post at all. So your response seems like very nonsensical. From what I got from the post, like this just seems like you took a hard left and started talking about something else. And I just don't think that that's what this person meant. So did you ask? And he was like, well, no, I didn't. And so I texted this person and asked, was this post about X, Y, and Z, or was it about something else? Or, like, what was it? And they affirmed that my interpretation was correct. Not you, Kyle. They affirmed that my interpretation was correct. And so I just like screenshot that and sent it to him. And I was like, my brother in Christ, I'm going to say this to you because I think you're man enough to handle it. But what the heck? I already know you know better because of how you acted in this circumstance. Why did you not talk to her privately? Like, I'm so sick of this mantra that like, well, if you post it publicly, I can respond to it publicly. Like, actually, if it's Catholic to Catholic, like Christian, if this is somebody that you view as your brother and not your foe, no, you should be privately messaging people so that you can respect their dignity. Because if I did post something that was like completely out of pocket and somebody messaged me and was like, actually, you completely missed this. Hello. I would, in humility, take that post down or leave it up, but like put an addendum in the post or create a second post or something. You know what I mean? Yeah. But so much worse when you like get in somebody's comments and you're like, actually, idiot. And it's like, first of all, now I don't
you're calling me out multiple times.
Yeah, and it's just,
I have definitely been guilty of calling people out on Twitter, but it's usually like extremely public people who I have no chance of ever talking to IRL. Mm-hmm. So like the only way you can correct somebody like that is publicly.
And I think that there's a space for that. I just don't think it's going.
But if it's somebody you know and you can contact personally, like I can't contact Joe Biden. So when he says something stupid online, I can actively publicly correct him because first off, who am I? He doesn't know who I am.
Yeah.
And secondly, he needs the correction.
Yeah.
Especially when he's doing the sign of the cross at an abortion rally. I'm like, what are you doing? What the heck was that? Anyway. But there's a difference. Like public figures that are massive and like you could not talk to them if you tried. Public correction, I think, is acceptable. But when it's somebody who is in the same space as you that you can actually talk to, you should try that first.
Yeah. And if you're going to have to resort to public correction, at least do it with as much class as possible. It's like, this is another thing that I said on Twitter recently was Kristen Hawkins tweeted something pro-life because of course. And then somebody who's running for Congress tweeted like what is that? What do they even call it now? Because it's not Twitter anymore, but she like quote.
It's called a post.
Okay. Quote posted her or whatever.
Yeah.
And said this.
It's still Twitter.
Said this BITC8. And I was like, you're running for Congress. And this is right after AOC was just going at Riley Gaines for another thing. And it's like, it's not classy. It's completely unbecoming. And just since when did it become super normal for politicians to be super like clapbacky, use swear words, snark, like I think there's room for that, but it should be not really swearing, like very exceptionally, but it should be done like sparingly, but it's not like it's the default. It's just you're an idiot. You need to get a job.
Well, the two opposing serpent heads are feminism and red pill.
Mm-hmm.
Those two movements are the antithesis of each other, but they're actually the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
So like feminism sprouted up like sometime in the 1800s during the Industrial Revolution when women started getting angry about not having the right to vote.
Mhm.
And a lot of the women in charge of the feminist movement just hated men. There was that was definitely an aspect of the original feminist movement. But the feminist movement created this really nasty dichotomy where these women hated men, and it led to some really awful things. And now the red pill movement is like the opposite. It's like men who hate women, and they're like, just sleep with as many women as you can and do whatever you want. And
Mhm.
because these two movements basically fuel each other, it's taken it way worse. Like, it's like everybody's one-upping each other to be worse at each other, worse than the other online.
Interesting.
Because the red pill is not compatible with Christianity. I don't care what anybody tells me
No,
about
it's
it.
not.
It never will be. It is not. The feminist movement also not compatible with Christianity.
Yeah.
And these two opposing forces are just making things worse for everybody, especially anybody trying to date. You get like the worst advice from red pillars online and the worst advice from feminists online.
Mhm.
What do you think? How do we bring these people back to the Christian thought process of courting and marriage and all that? What would you tell a feminist? What would you tell a red pill?
Well, one, I would discern whether or not this person is even interested, because
Well,
you can
yeah,
play everything perfectly and it still has to be a choice on their end, you know? So assuming they're open to it, the best way to do it is twofold, two-pronged, I guess. One, find the thing that they care most about and contextualize that, because you have to be motivated, right? Like, if I care the most about abortion and like my right to have one, and you're talking to me about Jesus's real presence in the Eucharist, it's like, dude, you're talking past me. Like, I don't care, you know? So find that way in there. And also, you just have to be really incremental. And this is something that's true of the Catholic Church, like, full stop, the world full stop, like how the Democrats turned Colorado. Colorado used to be a guaranteed red state, and now it's decidedly blue. And that happened over my lifetime because they were incremental, the Democrats were.
yeah.
That's how you do it. It's also how the Mormons did it. You do have to do the milk before meats, but you don't want to rush somebody into a commitment to something before they've actually had some meat. But yeah, you have to be willing to accept little wins and little losses, right? You have to be okay with losing the battle to win the war sometimes. And so it's acknowledging when it's important to push back on somebody's belief or statement in XYZ123, and uh accepting where they're at and saying, like, the Lord will take care of that. Like, there was actually a book, and it kind of shocked me when I read it, but I can understand it. There was somebody who fiance lady was Catholic, wanted to get married in the church, yada yada yada. He was not Catholic, but he converted for this marriage. And after he was baptized, he said thank you to the people who walked him through OCIA for basically not teaching him anything and just talking about football every Sunday, because he's like, I just straight up don't care. Like, football is my religion, blah, 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 blah. And for those people, they effectively discerned, like, he is just enough interested in Christianity, and we've, like, said the things that he needs to hear to where he can consent to a baptism, to a conversion, and all that jazz. Even if he thinks I'm literally just doing this, like, to fill out the paperwork, basically, so that my lady can have the wedding she wants and blah blah blah, but I don't really care. They walked him through the conversion process and allowed him to be baptized anyway, because they're going, the grace that he's going to get from baptism, God will work on his heart and God will pull him out of this mindset of, like,
You're planting a seed that you hope gets sowed
yeah.
later. Yeah.
And it was kind of wild because of the way that he stated it, which is like, I showed up for OCIA for an hour and a half every week, and all we did was talk about football. And it's like, what? Like, how is that OCIA? It's not OCIA. But obviously, I'm sure there was some hyperbole in that statement. And just, yeah, the idea that this guy is so blasé about his conversion, and they
Well,
were
I mean,
like,
how
yeah,
was your catechism growing up? Like,
for
was
me,
yours actually decent, or how was it?
it wasn't. I mean, so I went to Catholic school where we taught religion one day a week for an hour. And I do know an awful lot from that. But it's very, very, very basic, very, very, very rudimentary, like nothing crazy, right? My home life, the way that so my parents divorced. My mom was Presbyterian and was never ever Catholic. My dad was Catholic, and they agreed that I would be raised Catholic. My mom also did not practice. My dad did practice, but he practiced in the same way that I described my faith. He wasn't raised with parents who like knew the catechism and fully understood that they were the primary teachers of the faith and so on and so on and so on. He was more of like a pragmatic Catholic where he's like, no, you go to church, like you believe in Jesus, this is what you do. And so this is what we do, you know? He was like ardent, I guess, about tithing. And even when we were super broke, he still made sure to tithe, you know, things like that. So like he had this faith. It just wasn't heady, and he wasn't
it wasn't communicating effectively the theological positions and whatnot.
Yeah, and it wasn't like a cultivation of, you know, like I said, I wanted that community. I asked to go to Life Teen when I was a lot younger. I actually did ask to be an altar girl and stuff like that. And I was told no, because it was just too much. You know, it was a burden effectively.
Hey, if it makes you feel better, I got denied being an altar server for some reason. I don't remember what it was, but I know I asked and I didn't get to do it.
I'm glad in hindsight that I didn't do it, because who knows what would have happened. But that my faith wasn't cultivated. You know, there were a handful of things where like I could sort of, looking back, I can see where my faith was sprouting up. And this was not done with intention, but it was effectively stamped out by the choices that my parents made. And I was young, so it just was stamped out, you know?
Now, when you got to 8th grade, you got confirmation, I'm assuming in 8th grade, right?
7th grade.
Oh, 7th grade, so it was a little bit younger.
Yeah.
Was your parents was the thought process kind of the same as mine? It was like, as soon as you're confirmed, you can kind of decide for yourself whether you go to church or not? Because for me, it was the worst. Honestly, like I can't imagine an 8th grader making the right decision given that choice.
No. So I was in the Diocese of Phoenix. And so Phoenix went back to the like original order where you get confirmation communion in 3rd grade. Okay. But prior to that, you'd get confirmation in 11th grade. So I just so happened to be in 7th grade when that switch happened. So there was this like mad rush to confirmation for a lot of people. And so that's why I got it when I got it. And my dad was very like mind boggled, because he's like, it's confirmation. Like you're supposed to be confirming your faith. You're supposed to have been formed in your faith from the time you were like a child. And then you're adult enough to like assent that like, this is your decision and you're choosing this, but like, whatever, what do I know? Let's just get it done, you know? And interesting, like aside, just because I think you will appreciate it the way that I did. My dad insisted on being my confirmation sponsor. And so he went with me to the classes, and one of the gals who was teaching it was talking to us about the creed and how it says, for us men and for our salvation, he came down from heaven, blah, blah, blah. She's like, I hate that it says that. And I don't say that. I just say for us and for our salvation, he came down.
Oh my goodness.
My dad and I were both like, why? And she's like, because it says men and that's sexist and blah, blah, blah. And even as a kid, I was like, well, you know, like men is both masculine and neutral, and like men is in woman. Like
when men plural like that,
yeah,
especially in that context, it means mankind.
Yeah,
like, it's all people.
And so I asked that question, and she was like, no, it's because of like a patriarchal blah, 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 blah. You know, and my dad and I were just like, oh, okay, like, carried on.
You're telling me that Mary carried Jesus in her womb, and the religion is entirely male, and that's it?
The greatest non-God person to ever live was a woman.
Yeah.
Anyway, but yeah, so we went off on a little bit of a tangent. I think it was, how was my catechesis growing up? So yeah, good enough. To the point where, you know, like when I met with the missionaries, they were like, can you tell me like the basic story of mankind? And it was like, yeah, I know the story of Adam and Eve. Like, we're good. But also, I had not heard of an early church father until I was listening to Pints with Aquinas, like several years after my reversion. And it's like, how am I supposed to do this research of my faith if I don't even have the vernacular to know what to look up and when?
How much of the early church have you read? Just out of curiosity.
I've not read like an entire body of anybody's works, but I think I've read everybody. One of my classes,
at least a little bit of each. It's kind of a thing.
Justin Martyr is my favorite. They're all very different. I mean, one of my classes for my degree was on the early church fathers, and we had to read like dozens and dozens and dozens of pages of their works, and some of them we read more than others, but we read everyone, or most of everyone anyway. And there's definitely like a shocking difference in tone between them. Like just
Some of them are very sarcastic.
Yes.
Have you read
love
Saint Irenaeus?
Yeah, and I love Irenaeus. Yeah.
Irenaeus is my favorite
Yeah.
of the early church.
But some of them are just so like dry and awful. And I would say that in my like reflections, because we had to write reflections based on what we read. And I was like, oh, you know, St. Justin Martyr is so legalistic. He'd totally be a lawyer today. Like, I love how he just cuts and how he lists everybody by like every single part of their name. And then, you know, this other guy, honestly, like that was a snooze. This was really painful to read. I didn't like it. Like,
did you read the history of it was like called History of the Church by Eusebius of Caesarea? Caesarea, how do you pronounce that?
Maybe.
That was a really good one because he lays out pretty much the entire story of the church from the conception, you know, of Jesus essentially, all the way through when the church is legal in the Roman Empire. It's an awesome book. It spans about 350 years or so.
Okay, I don't think I've read that then.
That one's awesome. Got to find a good translation though, because the way it was originally written is like unreadable. It's a lot of repetition, and so I got a version that was we'll say anglicized.
Oh.
So the footnotes were terrible because it was all Anglican church footnotes, but the actual content was amazingly well put together. But I just found it so interesting because he talks about almost all of the early church fathers, why Origen is not considered a saint. Like they go through all of it. I'm like, what the heck? This is amazing.
Yeah.
Yes, Cat points. He's like, Eusebius is the best early historian for sure.
I was gonna find my notes on it, but I can't.
Oh, no big deal. I guess the next question I would ask you, I asked this to a lot of people. Do you have any particular opinion on whether Genesis 3:15 should read, "He or she shall crush thy head"?
On whether I think it should read that?
Yeah.
Let me see.
Most modern translations say he, but almost every translation prior to modern translations said she.
Let's see. Got my Ignatius Study Bible right here. I want to read it. You said
it'll probably have a footnote in on that, I bet. Genesis 3:15.
Okay, right after Cain and Abel. Okay, my punishment is greater than I can bear. Behold, you have driven me this day away from the ground, and from your face I shall be hidden. I shall be a fugitive and a wanderer of the earth. Whoever finds me will slay me. No, that's just 4. I'm in the wrong one.
Oh, I was going to say, what? That doesn't sound like anything I was talking about.
Let's see. Okay, because you have done this, cursed are you above all cattle and above you all wild animals. Upon your belly you shall go, and dust you shall eat all the days of your life. I'll put enmity between you and the woman, and between your seed and her seed. He shall bruise your head, and you shall bruise his heel. Interesting. Okay, before I even read the footnotes here, I can see it both ways, because literally, if we're talking about like for us men and for our salvation, it can go either way. But also, if we're going to think Mariology wise, we do think that, you know, like the woman in Revelation is Mary. And then you obviously see also in all of the art where she's always stepping on the head of the serpent. So,
because the Vulgate is Ipsa, which is she.
Like I defer probably to the earliest of anything without there being a compelling reason to go differently. So let's see if this says anything about it. Okay, yeah, so he shall. This is just what the Ignatius Study Bible says. The Hebrew should be read individually, or could be read individually as he shall, or collectively as they shall. The earliest known Jewish interpretation of this text takes the offspring of the woman to be an individual man.
Which does it say what their early Jewish interpretation is? I'm curious. I don't own the Ignatius Study Bible. I have a lot of we'll say contemporary texts that I've studied on this one that were contemporary with the time of Jesus, and I've come to a different conclusion than they have.
Okay, so it kind of continues on. So I guess to pick up where I left off, in parentheticals, it says Greek autos, autos, he, in the Greek LXX, and then it talks about bruising, and then it goes back to that topic. It says Christian tradition gives this text a messianic interpretation. Christ is the individual who tramples the devil underfoot, and it gives other parts in the Bible, as well as St. Irenaeus against heresies reasons for this, or citations for this. An ecclesiological interpretation, in parentheticals, the church is the offspring that shares in his victory, and they give Romans and Revelations as support for that. And a Mariological interpretation, parentheticals again, Mary is then promised, or is the promised woman who bears the Redeemer, Vatican II, Lumen Gentium 55. The passage has long been called the first gospel or proto-evangelium and stands out as the first revelation of God's mercy in Scripture. So I guess it sort of depends on how are you reading this? Are you thinking, are you looking for the literal interpretation? Are you looking for...
Well, it's actually important because you don't ever see the Bible say he historically until the Protestant Reformation, unless you got like some fringe scriptures that have existed. But in general, there was never a version of the Bible where it was he until not the one that was recognized by the Vatican or Rome until the Protestant Reformation. And I think because of the importance Protestants place on faith alone saving people, if it's he shall crush the head of the serpent, that makes sense because Jesus is going to do it and you don't have to do anything at all to earn your salvation. But if it is she, you're referring to the bride of Christ, you're referring to the seed, the church, and the church will prevent the gates of hell from prevailing. Does that make sense? I mean, that's kind of how I view it. And I always like to take the earliest version as more likely to be correct than later versions of things.
So I think that there can be, I see the wisdom.
I think it's a both and, but I also think that if you make it he, it pretty much vindicates Protestants for saying like, why do we have to do anything? He's going to crush the serpent.
So again, I see the wisdom in going like, well, what does the early church say? Like, there's a reason why people are always quoting the early church fathers. Like, it really matters what we taught in the beginning and what is recorded as having been taught in the beginning, and Catholics are vindicated an awful lot from that. However, there's also things that certain very respected and loved church teachers taught, including early church fathers, that today we'd be like, that's freaking whack, or that was the product of his time. Like, that was normal then. We recognize it's not now. Like, as revelation continues to develop, we get better understandings of things, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, right? So if you want to zoom in a microscopic sense, I can understand the argument that you're making, but I think the true answer to things like this is that Protestants love to do this. They love to zoom really in super, super tight on a text, sometimes even quoting like just parts of verses and ignoring the other part because that just doesn't sit right with them, to justify their beliefs. But we have to actually look at everything macroscopically, and we also have to come to understand the different senses. So like the tropological, the anagogical, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And understanding things as a whole is how you get the best understanding of what the teaching is. So if you want to zoom in on this and say like, well, if we say he, then like this is the conclusion we can make. It's like, okay, well, sure. But like also cross-reference that with everywhere else in the Bible. Is that consistent? Everywhere else in the Bible?
It is very
logically makes sense. No, it doesn't.
I would argue it is pretty consistent in the woman crushing the serpent's head.
No. I'm saying the opposite. I'm saying if you say he.
Well, because it's the proto-evangelium. So like Protestants, like, look, right from the beginning, God said we don't have to do anything. But the other half of that is, have you ever read the Jewish philosopher Philo?
I remember information far better than I remember names. So if you say whatever
he did an entire commentary at the time that Jesus walked the earth on Genesis. And he was considered one of the leading Jewish philosophers. So he actually has a writing on Genesis 3:15. And this is kind of where I hinge some of my thought process, where he says that essentially the Hebrew text would be he, because it's talking about the woman's logical defeat of the serpent. Where Mary's fiat, her logically, she says, yes, I will accept this. I don't necessarily know what it is yet. And basically, because Philo doesn't know Mary, he knows the Jewish scriptures and what they are, but he doesn't know Mary or anything like that because he's not privy to the New Testament yet. But basically, he says that it would be a barbarism of language, though, if you were to write this down as a non-Hebrew as he, because clearly all the sentences leading up to it are referring to the woman.
Yeah.
And so you wouldn't be referring to somebody who doesn't exist. So they're referring to the woman. And so like I guess the reason it makes sense is because they use more of an androgynous term to describe the Hebrew for the woman.
Mm-hmm.
And if it was a man, you would just use a standard male pronoun, which
Mm-hmm.
they don't do in the original Hebrew, according to Philo.
So I don't know if I've made, well, maybe I'll reserve it. I don't know if I've made my official opinion too clear, but in interests of arguing it out completely,
I don't want to do that here. I'm just telling you where my logic is.
Yeah, no. I see the utility in saying he. Like, I can see somebody making the argument of saying, well, if you say she, then it's Mary's work instead of just Jesus's work. Like, it was just Mary just needed to say yes. She just needed to crush the serpent's heel. Blah, 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 blah. Or I can see saying he as like again, for us men and for our salvation. Like, it's just a utility.
Well, that's why you would use
whatever.
he for logic, because the Hebrews didn't view logic as a female term.
Mm-hmm.
They viewed emotion and feelings as a female term. So if you were describing the feelings of something, you would use it's kind of like Spanish where you have like alternating genders for words.
Yeah.
So like this is, I guess, the way they would describe these types of functions.
Yeah.
You would use a male or female pronoun in that sense.
Yeah. But thinking explicitly in like part of biblical translation is not just what did this literally say, but what are they trying to communicate? And so even if we used gendered language and this gendered language says she in the context, it makes much more sense to say he. So we'll say he or vice versa, right? I think at the end of the day, this is speaking much more toward Mary. So I would be more pro she. I can understand utility, but I think it's a direct connection toward this particular event.
I totally agree with that.
My gut, but I can at least understand it. I don't think it's a completely useless assertion that maybe we say he. It's not. I still think she would be better, but I don't think
we're in 100%
agreement on this. That way. Yeah,
we're in 100% agreement on that. And I think it actually means a lot more if you're referring to Mary and the church too, because if the church itself needs works to defeat the gates of hell, then she, being the bride of Christ, would make sense. Yeah, as well as Mary.
Absolutely.
All right, next, I got another question involving Genesis. Maybe this will be a little more of a interesting topic for both of us to talk about. But who do you think is more at fault in the garden for the fall of man? Because I have I definitely think it's Adam, but I'm curious what your thought is.
So growing up, I had carried like a female guilt. Again, like the lack of catechesis. I was like, dang, like women really did us in. Like, I guess it's good that Mary also like helped us out because that's like a cosmic balance, if you will. But no, once I actually dug more into it, and I can't remember who it was. It may have been Father Mike. I don't remember. Somebody was talking about, like, they were discussing what's written there and how the serpent is talking to Eve, and basically immediately Eve turns to Adam, and they're like, so what does that mean? Adam was right there and watched the whole exchange and was like, not my business, basically. And if we're going to come to understand like the Christian biblical what is a marriage and who assumes responsibility for whom, I think we've all seen the image where it's like the children are under the umbrella of the mother, who's under the umbrella of her husband, who's under the umbrella of Jesus, right?
Yeah,
it's Adam's fault. I mean, I can't imagine, even in the opposite, I can't imagine my husband going to do something that I know is just whack and not being like, wait, have we thought about this first? What are we doing here? What's the explanation? Let me ask.
Wait a second. God gave us one commandment.
Maybe I'm missing some information here, but what are you doing? You know, I can't. Yeah. At the end of the day, if you are watching your wife about to, cause the downfall of all mankind, and you don't even like break in to be like, look, can we have like a regroup here and think about whether or not this is the best move? Like, that's literally your job, dude. She's supposed to be under your arm, next to your heart, not out of sight, not even out of sight, out of mind,
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I completely agree, because God gives the garden to Adam and then he gives Eve to Adam. So like the garden and Eve are his responsibility.
Yeah. He
should have cast the serpent out the second he saw it.
Yep.
Like that is just poor stewardship. Like, imagine you have a wild animal in your house. What are you going to do? As a man, I'm going to tell all my family to go into a room, lock the door, and I will get it out of my house.
Yeah.
So anyway, I was just curious where you were at on that. I assumed we were going to agree on that, but I wasn't 100% sure. You know, sometimes people have more detailed ideas of things and they surprise me. But
No.
I think that one's. I think once you kind of understand theology, I think that one's pretty clear.
I also think from a origin story standpoint, because there's always the discussion of exactly how much of what you read in the Old Testament is literally exactly true and how much of it is it's an origin story. Like it's meant to impress a certain lesson upon you. If the serpent had approached Adam and then that happened, it would be like, well, in terms of the natural order, it's really not on Eve to like correct her husband, or it's at least more understandable why she wouldn't, because he's got headship over her. So if we want to look at it from the origin story standpoint, it has to be Eve who initially makes the mistake, and it has to be Adam who ignores it. Because if you put it the other way, there's a really compelling argument for it being 100% Adam's fault, and that really changes the implications for the consequences for mankind and womankind. You know, like there would be some argument for a righteous split there, but that can't exist because Eve did it first and then Adam ignored it.
Now, have you ever heard? I've heard some really interesting theological arguments related to every sin is under Adam's patriarchy. Like it's his line. So like every sin is paid for by Adam. I'm like, that's nuts, because it's one of his children is the first murderer too, right? So like murders their own brother, and then bad sacrifice, God doesn't like it, and then we end up with the flood. So like all of that sin is under Adam's fall.
Yeah.
Isn't like, can you imagine taking credit for all of that? Like you're taking credit for generations of sin and problems.
The only, and I mean this as like non-diggy as possible, the only modern equivalent I can think of is Martin Luther. Like if you can imagine, if Martin Luther could see what the Reformation would have ultimately led to in this day and age, I don't think he would have done it. You know?
Oh yeah, no doubt. I mean, he quite, when you read through what he was saying, what he wanted was less corruption, at least what he viewed as corruption in the church. That's what he wanted.
Yeah.
And then he ended up kind of going a little crazy, and I think that might have
removing books from the Bible.
Well, no, he actually had like some mental faculty starting to go towards the end of his life. I think he had syphilis or something, one of those like brain diseases from an STD kind of a thing. So
I have not heard that. That's wild.
You'd have to look it up. He kind of went a little nutty at the end.
Yeah.
So some people think he had some kind of brain bug of some sort. But yeah, exactly. He was starting to regret it in his own lifetime. And he never intended to, like, I've heard this from many Lutherans that I've known over the years. Like, he never intended to separate from the church. That was not his intention. Yeah. But that's what happened. It's like, anyway, I mean, if you were to look at any figure today who could fit that mold, you could look at groups like the Sedevacantist, who are like still claim to be part of the church, but they don't accept the Pope. You've got groups like that. They're not nearly as influential as, say, like Martin Luther was. Yeah. But they reject the papacy because they view corruption in the church. Like, it's not that different from what Luther was doing, Martin Luther. Would you disagree with that? I mean, I'm not trying to throw darts at Sedevacantists. They're not like a huge group of people, but
I think for me, it comes back to logic and fruits. Like, does it make sense for this to not be the path anymore? I mean, that's also for me, in a large part, the difference between Orthodoxy and Catholicism for me is like, what makes sense and what are the fruits? And so, like, logically, I think the papacy makes the most sense. Everything needs to have some kind of CEO, that from the household to the church. Okay. We need that kind of thing. And then, what are the fruits of these things? Well, the Orthodox can't have any kind of like ecumenical council for the life of them. They can't just get together and do it because they all disagree, and some are in communion with others, but then
they're missing a final say.
It's exactly. It's impossible. And then with Sedevacantists, it's like, I watched in real time as somebody who I know, again, from online. She didn't say she was a seed, but I figured it out. And she said that, she was going to her church And then her priest died and there was nobody left to take over. So they all just sort of like go to their church on Sundays and like conglomerate for an hour and then they go back home. And it's like, what do
Really?
you Yes. I was like, what do you think is going on? Like, do you think
That's
that
wild.
God is just gonna like drop a priest on you at some point and like that's gonna fix it?
They're gonna
Because
show up,
the
manna's gonna be
Roman
raining from
Catholic
the
Church
ceiling.
has answers for this. Like, I would never go to church one day and find out if I only had one priest attending to my parish. I would never like go to church one day and find out that he died. And it's like, yeah, and now we have no idea what we're gonna do. Like, no,
Well, short term that might
like,
be the case, but long term it wouldn't be.
it just, yeah, we know what's going to happen. You have to, drive an hour and a half away to go to another parish for like 2 weeks because it takes time to get somebody to pick up and move. But like somebody will come, and that just wasn't happening. So, yeah.
Now, do you have a preferred liturgy? That's another question for you.
I love all of the liturgies that are underneath the Catholic faith. I have been to not every flavor of Catholic liturgy, but I make a point to go to different ones whenever I can. So usually whenever we're traveling, my husband and I get like really excited about seeing if there's any kind of like exotic Catholic liturgy nearby. And we go, and it's always a blast. It's always so, so fun. So I love all of them. I was raised in a very charismatic, very evangelical Catholic church, and I don't like that. That's probably the only one that I say I don't like.
What about like liturgical dancing? Where do you land on that?
I don't like that. So my parish was very. So we had like a full band: guitar, drums, tambourine, piano.
Drums do not belong in churches.
No organ.
I do not like drums in churches. It is like, it takes me completely out of what's going on.
Yeah, absolutely. We sang a lot of oh my gosh, what is his name? Dan something.
I know who you're talking about.
Yeah, lots
the
of
guy that's like all over the hymn books from the 70s.
Of heaven and earth.
That guy, yeah.
Lots of that. And
Dan Shoot, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
I was gonna it was slightly better when I was younger. And then we had our
Haley said she's done liturgical dance. Did you leave or did you keep doing it?
I mean, if you do liturgical dance like outside of the liturgy, that's cool, but not in it. As a Methodist.
As a Methodist. Okay, this makes more sense now.
But yeah, so that music director left, and then it eventually, they've had like a series every few years. They get like a new one, it seems like. And they've had, I guess, because I'm not there anymore, but they've had all kinds. They've had guys and girls and like a husband and wife team at one point. But it's a lot of people who do like the Christina Aguilera thing. And this is not me speaking catechetically. This is purely my opinion. I can't stand church music that is not meant to be sung along to. Like, my patron saint is Saint Cecilia. I am huge on the music and the liturgy. And the reason why I love chant so much is because it's relatively easy to follow. It's like the same thing over and over and over again. Like, it's just, I know like this chant is sung at this parish that I'm at, but I could also go to another parish like several states away, and they would probably pick up the same thing. Whereas when you're using some of the more modern people who are, known for their Christian songs, which I think are great. It's totally cool to have like amazing.
You don't want to build the city of God?
I don't know. And I don't want Matt Maher. I'm sorry to like name names. I don't want Matt Maher in church at all. I want him to attend. I don't want to hear his songs. I'm down to hear his songs on like K-Love or Relevant Radio or something. Like, I don't know who plays these songs on the radio. I'm down. Okay. I grew up listening to Switchfoot and Hawk Nelson and Avenged Sevenfold and like all of these bands. Like, I like it. I like the different music. I'm super, super down for like actual good Christian music being out there. I just don't think that all of it needs to be sung in mass. And I'm not the type of person who can go to any kind of like extra mass praise and worship session and feel at home. I actually find it really distracting. Like, even in those sessions at one point, I don't know what song it was. So I can't tell you the name, but I remember at one point I went to like an outside of mass praise and worship. It was supposed to be like a little bit of a lecture, a little bit of coming and into adoration, whatever. But at one point, this person was singing all these different titles for God. And it was like, the Savior, my Jesus, da-da. And then she's like, the Paraclete. And I was like, what? Like, what? I'm sorry. It's just so not like, it's such a modern sound, which is already like not my whatever. But then you insert the Paraclete of all titles and they're like, I don't know. It's such a strange one to pick, I know, but it was just so jarring. And I was like, I can't like focus and worship and adore right now because I'm just so focused on this music. And when that type of music is in the liturgy, I think it's effed up because nobody sings. They're all just like, wow, your voice is so beautiful. It's like, that's not the point. You are supposed to be singing. You are supposed to be partaking in this way. You're supposed to do it. Even if you can't sing worth a hoot, like at least quietly try. Like that's what you're supposed to be doing. When somebody's like twirling up and down,
the
it's
performance
not
takes
you.
away from the mass because it makes it about the performer, right?
Yes, exactly.
And that's how you end up with masses where people clap at the end. And I'm like, no. Why are you clapping at Calvary? What's wrong with you? I had
a friend who got married and her brother, killer singer, also a priest. So he officiated the wedding and he sang beautifully after we received communion. And after he was done, people started to clap and he turned and was like, no. And he kept going. And I was like, I'm mad at the people who clapped, but I'm also glad that he did that because I'm like, you're ruining it. And then he made it stop. I was like, just let him have done his thing and we move on because it was beautiful and it brought us closer. You know,
priests that are willing to point out the hypocrisy of their congregations are the best.
Yeah. But
we had a priest that recently shut down. I'm not going to say where or who it was, but there was a function that he was not told that there were going to be witches at this function at the church.
Like actual.
Like a witch group. Like they call themselves witches, so you got to believe them at their word.
Yeah.
Anyway, so they were not told what the entertainment was going to be. And so somebody found out that this group was doing that for their whatever fundraiser it was for. And the priest was like, no.
Yeah.
You either don't invite these witches and you can have this function or you shut it down. And they ended up choosing to shut down the function.
Yikes, man.
I'm just like, I mean, good. I'm glad the priest did it. I mean, like, he had already agreed to have this function there. He had no idea there was going to be that. It's like,
yeah.
Anyway, sorry, you had something you were going to say, and I
was just going to say I want to like actually answer your question and not do the thing where we talk about 1,000 other things and I never actually.
What question did I ask that you didn't answer? Oh, the liturgical preference.
Liturgy. Yeah. So the liturgy that I attend to is a very reverent, very Latin, very chanty Novus Ordo.
I was 2002 missal.
I don't know. I was raised in the Novus Ordo. I've been to traditional Latin masses. I feel like some people describe going to the TLM as this like out of body ethereal experience, and I don't want to speak poorly of it, but I don't know how else to say it other than to say it's just another liturgy for me, whether it's a high mass or a low mass. It's beautiful. I love it. It's fantastic. All of the things. Okay. But I'm not like, oh, that's so much better than the Byzantine. That's so much better than the Syro-Malabar. Like, it's another liturgy, and I love it. And if I went somewhere and there was a TLM like right there, then I'd totally go. But I'm really happy with traditional, reverent Novus Ordo masses, and that's where I go. That's what I do. That's what I prefer.
How do you feel about some of these bishops trying to ban ad orientem? Because that kind of stuff makes me mad. Because not only are they trying to get rid of the TLM, but they're also like, let's not let the priest face the altar either.
Yeah, I don't know. That's weird. I don't see a utility in saying get rid of that. I can at least see the argument for saying no to TLM, but
for unity's sake, I understand why some bishops might feel that way.
Yeah. So
I'm not saying I'm sympathetic to that thought process at all.
Yeah.
But I understand why they might think that way.
Yeah. I mean, maybe I'm missing some information here, but I don't see what that does. Like, I could understand saying no guitars in mass. I think that is literally a rule. You're not supposed to. I can see that. I don't see the point of saying you can't do that. No, none of this. You must
listen. You haven't seen a Deep South banjo mass yet, okay?
I've seen a cowboy church.
Have you? Oh, yes.
Boy. One of my friends goes to a cowboy church. She's a Baptist.
Love okay, her. Well, Baptist, that's a little different. All right. I see what you did there. Haley said that the Methodist church had altar rails. That's pretty wild. Yeah, I mean, It would be based if it was Catholic, but
Yeah.
it's Methodist, so not based.
Based tendency, based inclination.
Inclination towards
I remember.
the base.
Do you know who pro-life Spider-Man is?
I don't know. Enlighten me.
He is a pro-life activist, and his whole thing is he just climbs structures. So I think he super blew up the first time when he climbed the Chase Tower in Phoenix. And then he blew up recently because he caught charges for climbing the dome in Las Vegas. But he just does it to get attention on the pro-life cause. You know, people are like, why are you doing this? And he's like, because people are killing babies. And based, right? But he is a Calvinist. He was raised Catholic. And I went and did a pro-life thing with him not that long ago. And we were talking a little bit about it. And I actually told him that I was raised in a church that had like guitars and drums and stuff like that. And he'd be like, in a Catholic church? Like it was quite the like shock moment for him. And also just the revelation of like the way that my church was growing up is so outside of the norm. Like I thought organs were boring. You know, like even in my Catholic school, we didn't use organs. I went to 2 different Catholic schools. We used pianos. Like, I don't know. I thought organs were like this weird old Presbyterian, Lutheran, like choice. Like, I don't know. I didn't really know why people used organs. I was like, they just sound old. I don't know.
You know what's really sad about your story about pro-life Spider-Man, though, is he can probably do that with minimal funding and get more attention than most pro-life organizations.
I mean, he basically does. He literally lives... So what we did was he had a what do they call it? An advocate house. I don't even know what you call it, but basically it was us, him and I, and like 12 at least other people, maybe even more over varying days, came and stayed at this like activist house, multiple women, you know, like sharing the same room, that kind of thing. And we went and like protested outside of a clinic and like all this stuff. And he does it on these like shoestring budgets basically, and like the whole time that we were there he was talking like, yeah, I'm gonna take this meeting and like hopefully get this other guy who like privately, you know, donates and whatever, and like we're only here at this house because we got another donor who agreed to pay for the house for like 2 weeks or something like that, you know. So he does these like smaller budget things, and he works on like bigger things of course too, but
massive respect for that. That's awesome.
Yeah, he does. It's like, what do you call it? Guerrilla pro-life.
Guerrilla warfare.
Yeah.
That's pretty wild.
Yeah.
So you've heard of these like Catholic mega churches, right? A couple of them have made the news. Have you been to any of them?
Define Catholic megachurch.
It literally looks like a mega church, except it has a priest and an altar in the front of it on a stage.
Nope.
There's like, I know of at least 2 of them.
Yikes. Sorry.
Imagine like walking up to communion and an Enoch song comes on. Like, this is the kind
of Enoch so much. I have like every album, I think.
Right. The same here.
Yeah. Again, I love you, Enoch, but like, I don't want Enoch in mass. I don't want Matt Maher in mass. I don't want, who else can I pick on? Isaiah Keys. Is that?
How about the thirst thing?
What is his name? I can't remember.
You don't want to hear the thirst thing either, right?
No, but oh my gosh, Salve Regina is such a banger. Anyway.
Well, that 5-song album they released, I'm trying to figure out a time frame where I can interview them. So if they ever watch my content, we're still working through this. I'm gonna try and find a time. But the thirst thing, their album just slaps. It's awesome.
Yeah, it's so good.
That is amazing. And all they did was like rockify some seriously cool old hymns.
Exactly. Have you heard their battle hymn?
That is one of my kids' favorite songs right now.
Okay. Yeah. Battle Hymn of the Republic. That's it. Yeah. Their version. Love.
Yeah. Haley's right. Enoch would walk out of mass if they played this song.
Probably.
All right. So I guess my next question for you is, so who is your target audience then these days?
So I am still trying to talk to Catholics who have the foundational level of knowledge. Like when I make content, that's another like tricky part of what I say is when it reaches people who I'm not talking to, it can be a little confusing. So I pray a lot and ask that the Holy Spirit, you know, guide people. And if they see something and they weren't ready for it and they don't get it, that it just proves to be a seed rather than a buffer, you know, because there are some things that I, you know, share or say or talk about that I don't want to say you're not ready to hear it, but it's like, that's kind of the point. It's like, you should be at the point in your walk where you're like, yeah, dude, I know Adam and Eve. Yes. I know real presence. Yes. I know. But you need to be kind of like deeper in your catechism. You need to be deeper in your philosophical mindset. Like, this is just staring me in the face, so I'm going to plug it. This book, if more people would read this book, I'm doing more content, or have been recently. I haven't posted in like a week or whatever. But if people, I've been doing more content that aligns to this book, basically, which talks about how the philosophy or philosophical view of proving God exists and proving that all men are seeking God and that the highest happiness is like unification with God and yada, yada, yada. But there's just the method of thinking that Father Austin goes through in this book is so crucial. And it's based on people that we know and love. Okay, St. Thomas Aquinas, Aristotle, like they're quoted ad nauseum in this book. But it's a way of thinking about the faith that I think feels a lot less academic, and it feels a lot more, what is the word?
Authentic?
No, it's not charismatic either. It's what is it?
Pragmatic?
On my tongue. No, it's like leaning into the mystical sense of the faith, right? Like when people
okay.
Yeah. So it's metaphysics is what it is. It's taking the intersection of everything. Like, okay, let me think about history. Let me think about tradition. Let me think about logic. Let me think about philosophy. Let me think about all of the things. Does she need me? My husband just walked in with my baby. Think about all of the things and like get to this intersection where all of these things come together. Where is the one point where they all hoops me away, where they all overlap and it all makes sense because hello, baby. Because like this is the only place where they can all overlap and all make sense, right? That has to be the truth. Like that has to be the fullest truth. Now people can neglect to account for certain things and then get to points that they like it makes sense. I see where you're going. Hey, can I help you? It's right here. I see like the logic. I see the thought process. I see why people come to certain conclusions, but inevitably it's because they are missing some piece of the conversation. So as much as I'm trying to hit that mid-level catechetics, I'm also trying to point out that you can't just read the Bible, read the early church fathers, read the catechism, and think about it yourself and like, yep, that's it. That's the conclusion. Or, oh, I asked my spiritual director, or, oh, I asked my priest. Like, yes to all of those things, but also there's even more. And I think a lot of people are very enthusiastic about the academic intelligence side of the faith. And that's just like a current undercurrent that I see happening right now, where people try to, people try to intellectualize the faith so much that they completely miss out on these other parts that would make them a better Catholic. And that's sort of the point. I want not just for people to know beyond the basic level of the faith, but to overall create better Catholics, people who think about all sides of things and recognize, hey, maybe I should be a lot slower to criticism. Hey, maybe this take that I had a few years ago, maybe that was like really off base. You know, maybe I need to be more tender towards the Holy Father or slower to anger or whatever, because it's not enough to know what the church teaches if you're not synthesizing it and letting it completely change your life.
That makes sense. I get what you're saying. See, I'm not like somebody that holds grudges. Like, I never struggle with the idea that confession washes things away. Because like me, somebody makes me mad, and like 10 minutes later, totally gone out of my head. I like totally. Yeah. So I'm like, that always made sense to me. And like with the faith aspect, right? You don't want to condemn people who might be on a journey towards the faith. You don't want to make somebody who might have been headed towards the true faith in Jesus step away and go somewhere else.
Yeah.
So having a take that's where people need it to be to get where they need to go is a very difficult thing to gauge at all times in all places.
Mm-hmm.
So I get what you're saying. It makes a lot of sense. Do you find that you have a lot more female, male, some combination of the two audience members, or like what?
So on Instagram is my most feminine audience, but it's still like 60 40, 65 35 split. where that smaller percentage is masculine, but on every other platform that gives me those details, I skew way more masculine than feminine.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow. So your appeal is kind of more wide range than just women that are between the ages of 20 and 40 or something.
Yeah. I also, so if you go by like, what's the word, generation, I think my most popular generation is at millennials, then Gen X, then
Gen X over Gen Z. Wow.
Yeah. It might even be boomers over Gen Z. I'm not sure. I'd have to double check. They're like really close. But yeah, I think because I am a wife and a mother, I'm more appealing towards older.
That makes sense.
But yeah, I think my way of thinking, my mindset, the way that I talk and relate to people, like I was definitely that chick growing up who had more guy friends than girlfriends, you know? I think that is my method of communicating, the way that I talk. I spent a lot more time at my dad's house than my mom's house, you know?
Yeah.
So I think that's part and parcel for why I have and do post, you know, outfit of the day things, but it's like to my stories, and my stuff is not meant to be like, it's a Catholic vibe. It's meant to be like actually educational and like hearty and meaty. And I think there's a place for sure. You know, lots of women love that stuff and they really get something out of it that men just don't get, because men and women communicate differently.
Yes,
But I think if I posted more content like that, I wouldn't have as much of a masculine audience.
All right. I do have one more question for you. If you were to give advice to either young men or young women or both, for especially like the single people that are trying to find marriage, what advice would you give them?
So two things. And
there's a lot of them out there. That's why I'm asking.
This is gender neutral advice. The question you should be asking yourself, I think most people know who they want to marry. They know who they're looking for. But are you who the person you're looking for is looking for? That's a big one. And if you're not, what can you change? And that sort of feeds into point 2, which is, what can I do about me? And that works for people who are not dating at all. You know, what can I do about myself to make myself better? And also, if I'm in this relationship and is it headed toward marriage or is it not? It's less about how do I change the person in front of me and more about what can I do about me? How do I grow in holiness? How do I better serve my future spouse, whether it's this person or not? What can I do about me? I think a lot of that discussion online that we were a little bit talking about earlier. Thank you. A lot of it is, you know, like the feminism versus red pill or the MGTOW or whatever it is.
MGTOW essentially becomes red pill. It's basically the same thing.
But a lot of it is focused on, you've hurt me, you're wrong, and now I'm doing this to spite you. You know, like that's the conversation. Yeah. It's like that doesn't actually make you happy or better. What makes you happy and what makes you better is going, what can I do about me? And that's also advice for married people. It's just good life advice in general, is people are going to let you down. Life is suffering. Life is not fair, all that jazz. So if you're looking to succeed in finding a spouse, determine whether or not you are the person that the person you're looking for is looking for. And no matter what state of relationship you're in, what can you do about yourself to make your situation better, to make yourself better, to be more successful in your endeavors, whatever.
All right. I'm going to open up the floor to you now. Is there anything we haven't talked about that you want to talk about?
The one thing that I wanted to be careful about doing this whole time was making sure that while we were talking about Mormons, that we were not uncharitable. And so I maybe just put like a really firm rubber stamp. Like, I love Mormons. I love Mormon people. They're wonderful. I have
got a whole bookshelf full of
Mormons. Yeah, I have friends who are all varying flavors of Mormon, from like the super, super devout to like the kind of Jack Mormon to the people who are out. And I hear all sides of it. I genuinely try to be really fair when discussing these things. And I hope that came across when I was discussing it. I mean, it's a delicate balance, because on the one hand, my story is that I was lied to, and that's like a really uncomfortable truth to sit with. But I don't say that accusatorily. I say it just because it's what happened, you know?
Yeah.
And if any Mormon ever wanted to discuss things with me, I'm totally open to having those discussions and what have you. I don't want to be antagonistic toward other people. I'd much rather build bridges, even if nobody ever crosses them. At least they're there. So,
well, if we do do this again at some point, I'd love to hear your thoughts on the charismatic movement, because I had some really strange experiences with the charismatic movement, and it was short lived. I didn't live it my whole life. It was maybe a year and a half of my life that I spent doing stuff with charismatics. And man, it always kind of weirded me out, especially the speaking in tongues, because it didn't match what I would think biblically that would be.
Yeah.
I held a whole conversation with Dr. Blosser about it, but I'd be curious if you have a short take on it or a long take on it, if you want to talk about it real quick. I don't know.
The short version of it is that everybody has a different spirituality. And for the charismatics, that's their spirituality. And for the non-charismatics, that's your spirituality. I think as long as you don't look down on it or think that it's something like wild or wrong or anything like that, then you're in good.
Unless it is actually like blatantly wrong, then you're welcome
to charismatic. Then that's like something else, pagan or something. I don't know.
I guess that would be heresy at that point, right?
I mean, do you listen to the Exorcist Files at all?
The Exorcist Files. I've listened to some Exorcist stuff, but never the Exorcist Files.
Okay, so that they have a lot of good episodes, and there's actually one on talking in tongues as well. But there's different. Again, it just comes down to what I said. Different people have different spiritualities and different gifts of the spirit and different talents, and they're in touch with different things. And so it's like, in the same way that I would never say like Benedictines are, cringe, but Dominicans are the way. It's like, actually, no, they're all fine, including the Jesuits. But we just have to like respect that this is my vocation and this is my calling and this is my spirituality. And that is not, but I'm glad that somebody's doing it because it couldn't be me. You know what I mean? Like that's totally.
With all due respect, I definitely don't accuse
any weird territories. Like
I don't accuse them of being like heretics or anything like that. They have a different understanding of the charismatic gifts and stuff like that. And most of these people are extremely devout Catholics.
Oh, yeah. No,
even if I disagree with some of their charism aspects, like I don't think they're bad Catholics.
Exactly. Yeah, no. Mine and my former priests is very, very charismatic. And has, I don't know, there are some other things. I would say that I'm actually more of a charismatic Catholic than I may appear to be, because I don't push that like out there, but I definitely have some like, okay, let me ask you this. Father, Son, Spirit, do you feel like you're closer to either any one of the Godhead?
If I had to choose, I mean, I don't know, the fatherhood thing, because I without going too into details, because people say like, oh, you shouldn't talk about mystical visions and stuff like that because it could scandalize people, and you really got to get
revelation. You don't have to hear to it. Blah blah blah.
That whole thing. Yeah. I've had some very weird experiences associated with fatherhood, Saint Joseph, God the Father, that kind of stuff, and that happens to me relatively consistently. I don't think I've ever gone longer than 6 months without something strange or some strange message.
Yeah.
But again, those are for me. I'm not sharing them for me and anybody I'm told to tell, but I still run it through my priest before I do anything else. But anyways, I would say the Father, I guess.
Yeah. So I think that's interesting. I think it's also enlightening, kind of in the same way where people are like, oh, are you choleric? Like, I don't know. I just think these things tell you different things about your faith. I am closest to the Holy Spirit. And I think that makes sense given my whole experience going out of the Mormon church and stuff like that. But also, I think there's an element, the Holy Spirit is a spirit. He's disembodied. He's, breath. He's all these things that it's like, it's not, your dad is your dad. And Jesus was Jesus, and he died on this cross, and there's just an element of like disconnection there. And I kind of think that the charismatic movement, if we're going to file it under one way or try to, human language is only so precise and can only do so much to understanding these things. And that's kind of where I see the charismatic movement is. I feel like it's a lot of that, literally that spirit moving, and it looks weird and it seems weird because there's not a natural explanation for it. We all have a father. We all have a body. So like I can immediately relate. And some of us are fathers ourselves, you know, like we can immediately relate to these things in a more ready sense than we can to the notion that Jesus went on the apostles and suddenly something happened. You know what I mean? Like it's a lot more difficult to like meditate on that part of things. And yeah, so I don't think that there's anything wrong as long as it's done within like the confines of the church. And I do think a lot of it looks really weird, and a lot of it is like, even for me, that's not my bag. I've never once spoken in tongues. Like that's just it's not for me. But at the same time, like I totally would go and do exorcist ministry. Like if God tomorrow called me to that, I'd be so down. You know,
I had a friend that got asked to help out with an exorcism, and he said it was life-changing.
I got asked. I didn't do it back when I was asked, though.
Yeah,
Your house
I didn't
in order to do that, and my home was not in order at that.
I did not realize lay people get asked to assist with exorcisms until he told me that story, and I was like, "Whoa, okay."
Yeah.
Anyway, is there anything else?
No, I think that's everything. But we should come back and talk about the charismatic movement more.
Yeah. Is there anything you want to promote?
I don't think I can share anything that I'm working on openly right now. So I'll actually ask for prayers. Pray for certain endeavors that I'm working on. Catechized Catholic is moving toward a large pivot where the content will still be there. It'll just be a lot better and higher quality, and it'll lean more toward long form than short form. But that's taking a lot of work behind the scenes and a lot of time. And I'm script writing and doing all kinds of things. I'm doing too much is what it is. So pray that I have this supernatural ability to do all the things that I need to do and to close out the things that I need to close out. Like we moved in July and we're still not fully unpacked. So it's like, I need to be able to close that tab in my brain. So please pray for me, for my husband, for my family, so that we can successfully unpack our house. We're going to host a Thanksgiving. My husband's in law school. He's a 1L right now. So, you know, pray for him in that, and pray for me and my endeavors so that we can do all of the things and have some sort of work-life balance and peace. That would be amazing.
All right. Well, yeah, everybody, if you're in the chat right now or you're watching later, pray for Desiree. And hopefully they'll get a few more packs of the DESIRAE beer.
I need more. Help me.
And on that note, I'll see you guys on Wednesday. I'm doing a double podcast again this week. And thank you for being here. Really appreciate you giving your time and coming on my podcast.
It's good to talk to you. Bye, everyone.
Bye, guys. If I can click the button.